Welcome to the Learn Beach Volleyball Fast podcast, the podcast where we apply the science of mastering skills faster, stories of successful people, life hacking concepts, and other cool stuff to the sport of beach volleyball. If you're someone who is serious about getting better at the sport and wouldn't mind accelerating your learning curve and career with ideas that have been previously hard to find within the beach volleyball space, you'll probably like it in here. I'm Alex, the host of the podcast, as well as the creator of the bigger Learn Beach Volleyball Fast project. Now, let's get started. What's up and welcome back to the podcast. This episode is a player interview. I'm interviewing Nejc Zemljak, who is a Slovenian World Tour player and also someone who's involved in beach volleyball in many other ways. So basically, this is two volley nerds unleashed. So what ended up happening is another very long conversation. It went on for almost 3 hours. So I decided to split this talk up into 2 episodes, and you are now listening to the first one. We ended up talking about a lot of different things. So in the beginning, we talk about transfer between sports and sports psychology and how to grow the sport, etc., etc. And I thought for maybe some listeners, it's relevant. After a while, I do turn the conversation more into like how to play beach volleyball. So we also ended up talking servicey, floats versus topspin, a lot of thoughts around servicey, blocking, attacking, defense, and whatnot. So there's really, I think, a little bit of something for everyone in these 2 episodes in this talk. And about 2 weeks after I recorded the episode, I re-listened to it and I realized that this is a thought-provoking conversation. So basically what happened in my mind was that just by re-listening to what I said, what he said, a lot of new thoughts grew in my mind. Like I would today want to ask him different questions. I both agree and disagree with things that I said myself, etc., etc. So thought-provoking, I think, is good because it leads to new questions, new things to explore, and that is what I believe this episode is. So I think that's enough background info, except there's one more thing. Right before I started recording, Nejc had shared that later that same day he was going to go play soccer or football, depending on what you say, where you're from. So with that in mind, let's get started. That's amazing.
I miss that kind of stuff. It's now because you're always training. So then, you always sort of, if you do physical activity, it's either beach volleyball or it's something that's going to help you with beach volleyball. So gym.
Yeah.
And so I basically left out all of my other sports that I love doing. So anything from like badminton, paddle, soccer, basketball. I love playing all of them.
Yeah.
But it's just that you just don't do that often. So now it's sort of like the off season where you play it like once or twice. So you take advantage of it. But it's also like, I know that my body wouldn't be good for it. So
yeah, that's interesting. Actually, I just happened to record just now. But that's actually interesting. Do you feel like you learn stuff from the other sports do you sometimes get like unexpected lessons from the other sports?
I would say not anymore.
Not anymore?
Yeah. I think now it's, I don't know, maybe it was different before, but now it feels like if I do training, then I want to do like sports-specific training. And I don't know if I really like, me playing soccer or paddle or playing badminton at a, pretty average level.
Yeah.
Would really benefit me in something where you're like striving a little bit more towards, like this is I don't want to say perfection, but, where you're striving towards like, executing the move at a pretty high level. So I don't see that many. It's actually more that I take something that I know from my sport, helps me in the other sports.
In the other sport, yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm.
But I think the knowledge in the other sport, it's way too low to help me with beach volleyball, essentially.
Okay, yeah. That makes sense. But did you say that earlier?
It might have been, I'm not sure, but I'm a little bit more of a believer that you do like specific stuff. So if you want to get better at running, you run. If you want to get better at playing beach volleyball, you play beach volleyball.
Yeah.
And then also, there was always this debate, if you should do like sport-specific exercises in the gym, for example.
Yeah.
I think it goes to a certain extent, but you don't train your passing platform in the gym. You don't. You get faster, stronger in the gym, and that then applies to your sport. But you don't train your technique, for example. You don't become a better technical setter and not a better technical passer in the gym.
No.
But so I think I think those cross functions they're not as big as usually people give them, or like some people try to give them credit to.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit both, and that's actually a new thought. If I think maybe the closer to a top level of a sport you are, the less benefit you're gonna get from other sports.
Yeah.
Because if you take a complete beginner beach volleyball player, like I can at least usually see if they have played tennis or soccer or something before, because they know how to move their bodies better.
They just have better body control, awareness. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And like sometimes people that have been very competitive in other sports can sometimes be better mentally.
As well, I think. But I think it goes like, but they did another sport at a higher level. So, and now they're like trying to apply some of that to a sport where they're at a much lower level.
So then it sometimes crashes.
So there are benefits from it, but I don't know if it's necessarily that like now, you're trying to be, for example, a professional in hockey, and you go and play tennis as a recreational player, and then all of a sudden you're gonna be better at hockey. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, it could happen that you take a valuable lesson from it, but I think it's very rare, and I wouldn't invest time into it. So
yeah, okay.
And I think training. I think when I was in the States, there was this kind of a saying amongst coaches always that if you want to become a better server, the best thing is to go serve. If you want to become a better passer, the best thing is to go serve, pass, set and hit. So for everything that you wanted to improve, the best drill was to do serve, pass, set, hit, and then maybe even play defense against it. But this was always like the more it's the actual environment of what you wanna learn, the better it is.
Yeah.
So we always like try to do stuff that was very, very much specific to the skill that we're trying to learn, but also in the game environment of it. So that was always. So for me, doing like I said, other sports, it's nice to do something else every once in a while to, challenge other muscles, to challenge your mind a little bit. But I don't think there's like so huge benefits to the actual sport that you're trying to learn.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. So I don't know if the recordings start before or after you said that you were gonna go play soccer tonight.
Yeah.
But basically you feel then that it's more or less a waste of time in a sense for your beach volleyball career.
Yes. But I think it's also just nice to go and do something different. It's nice for the mind to do something else, and it's just something I think when you're pursuing a career in something, let's call it that way. Then a lot of times you make sacrifices, and I think I mentioned that before we started recording that I love playing other sports. I love playing badminton. I love playing paddle. I love playing soccer, basketball. And these are the things that you now give up because every time you put basically pressure on your body, or like when you train or when you get exhausted, you use it to take you a little bit further in your sport. So, and I don't think those sports necessarily take me further. It's fun for me to challenge someone in badminton, but it doesn't really help my beach volleyball career.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, makes sense. Yeah, I always try to come up with activities that don't strain the same muscles in a sense.
Yeah.
Like if for example, if my shoulder is tired from volleyball, like I think it's good because I also have this aspect that I just want to move like every day. Like it's just my life is just better. I'm just a happier person if I get to do something physical every day, and I can't every day necessarily do beach volleyball.
But it's also like recovery is very important, and then like also if you probably go and do other activities, I don't know, maybe you played beach volleyball yesterday or 2 days ago, and then the next day you go and run, it's still your legs are still feeling it.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
It takes away from the time you could have used for beach volleyball.
It does.
So essentially, if you want to get the best beach volleyball player, you're essentially probably not doing it the biggest favor.
Yeah.
But I mean, for the holistic approach to life, it's very good.
Exactly. Yeah, it's such a balance there. But like one thing, as long as I don't have shoulder problems from beach volleyball, I sometimes do disc golf because it's a very chill sport. I don't need to run. I don't need to jump. I don't need to. Like, yes, you can get shoulder problems from it because it's also explosive for the shoulder, and it is explosive in the full body in a sense, but it's not like you don't get sweaty, you don't get tired, and stuff like that. So,
well, there's also the first question for me that arises with this: is that a sport or is that an activity? So
probably depends who you ask.
Yeah, for me, I always define it sort of like, and although I'm not the biggest fan of the whole Olympic movement anymore, but it's if you talk about higher, faster, higher, stronger, or something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know if this all applies to that sport. So
no, that's true.
So that makes it for me a little bit more of an activity. If somebody is very much decreasing their physical ability, but can still perform at a peak, then it's probably not a real sport for me.
Okay, so
but it could be a very difficult, challenging activity.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So for me, like I have huge respect, for example, for golfers.
Yeah.
But for me personally, it's not a real sport. But it's a very demanding activity where I cannot compete with the golfers, and I have giant respect for their skill. But I wouldn't define it as a sport because it doesn't incorporate those aspects of like you actually have to perform sort of physical as well. And then I know people come up with like, yeah, but Tiger Woods, and he's like, like training in the gym, and but then like there's also somebody who's like 50, 60 and fat, sorry to say it like that, and he can still compete at, be challenging that Tiger Woods guy.
Yeah.
So you do an activity, but I don't know if it's a sport.
Yeah, that's a good point. I guess some disc golfer out there is probably going to be pissed at you for saying that, but
yeah, but I mean, I'm not trying to take anything away from their skill. I think it's a very impressive skill, and it's demanding, and also with them like recognizing the situation and seeing the path, and like taking one that curves left and curves right, whatever they do, it's impressive. But I still think when we talk about sports, it has to have that physical component that you sort of gain a little bit of an advantage with or if you're not able to do certain things physically, then you shouldn't be competitive.
Yeah.
And that's what separates, at least for me personally, what is sort of like an activity, fun activity, and what is a sport.
Yeah, makes sense. So that means that chess is also not a sport.
No, but it's I love chess and great respect to what they do and how they train and what combinations they're able to do and what they foresee. But it's
Yeah. No, the parts where I think that maybe some of these activities could at times be even more intense than beach volleyball is the mental aspect, like competitiveness, staying focused, not getting distracted. When stuff is on the line and stuff like that. So, but it's not in the physical sense. It's not the same.
But also, like then we can talk about and I think this goes for beach volleyball, tennis, then any kind of golf and stuff. How long do you really have to be focused? You have to be focused for those in golf. What is it? They play a par 4, for example. So it's for 4 shots. And in between you can do whatever you want. Your mind can wander off wherever you want to, but you have to just be able to regain that focus right before you hit that second shot, which could be like 5 minutes later. So how much more mentally demanding is it really? Then another sport is just about how long of a breaks you take in between those. And technically in beach volleyball, you can be focused and then take a little bit of a off in between the points for 15, 20, 30 seconds, and then you have to refocus again. So I think we're just now,
that's an interesting point, because I think some people would argue that the opposite, that you have momentum in beach volleyball because you stay focused all the time, and in golf you have to take these breaks. So it's a little bit like when you take when someone has a serve streak and you take a timeout to get them like to not be able to continue on their momentum in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, but that's why, for example, like whenever we, and maybe, I don't know, but this is now a question a little bit more for psych guys, and I only worked with sports psychologists, but we always try to find sort of like key phrases, trigger points, sort of in a sense, that put you back into
the right, yeah.
Yeah, so like, you know, like for example, when you're passing, you probably have, or when you're serving, you're probably focusing on one big thing that was sort of your focus in training, or that was your focus in playing, or maybe it was something that was hindering you to perform a good serve or a good pass. And then you have this one key phrase that reminds you, you know, like, I don't know, you have to do this with the arm, you have to look there, something, whatever. And then you just try to remind yourself before you do that skill. So you try to get yourself as much in this stage as you can. So, you know, technically it doesn't matter then if somebody took a timeout, if you can get yourself back into that.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. So for me, it was also, and I'm maybe a little bit different here, but for me, I didn't care if people took a timeout.
Okay.
And then it's just, I think it's also a little bit of a perspective, because some people value the point after a timeout like higher. And it would be an interesting statistic that I've never done, but for example, some people gave me praise because I was kind of like, that was my college times. I would be the guy who had sort of a green light and I could serve. I could just go for my serve all the time. And there was quite not like often, but it happened a few times that, you know, you got a ace on like a set ball or after a timeout, but then it also happened that you missed. So there was certain people giving you praise like, oh, you're such a good server after a timeout, or like when it comes to crunch time, and other who were giving you like sort of, you're such a bad server. So it would be interesting to see the statistics, but I think it's just like some people tend to focus on this one area more than the other. You know, some people are just like, oh, he made an error after a timeout, like he completely played into their cards, and the other ones were just like, oh, he served an ace. I don't know which one happened more often, but
yeah, this is the interesting where like bias becomes like, depending on what you focus on, that's what you end up seeing.
Yeah.
And that's right. That's when we would actually need statistics to be able to say what has happened.
But at the end of the day, it's only 1 point, right? So why does it really matter now? It's like, what do you believe? At the end of the day, I wanted to get my 25 points or now 21 in beach volleyball, right? So does it really matter if I make, you know, if at the end of the day I made 2 errors in the set, does it really matter that much what moment I was at?
Yeah, that's maybe not. Yeah, that's interesting. I guess we got our intro done. I just clicked the record button and I was like starting to think about what I was gonna do for an intro, but I think we already started.
Oh, yeah.
But let's welcome you to the podcast anyway. So first things first, name, Nejc or Nejcs?
Nejcs.
Nejcs, okay.
Yeah. a good old Slavic name that has a weird spelling and is a torture to pronounce internationally. Yeah, that's me. So, but anything goes, like living in the States, living in France, living in Sweden, and, you know, like different languages, and seeing my name written with Nejc, it's just, I think I've heard all kinds of different pronunciations already, so I don't think, I don't get offended with it or anything like that, so.
No, that makes sense. That makes sense. So I don't know how many of the listeners will know you from before and how many will not. I know myself, I have some ideas just because, well, you have some history here in Sweden, and now just the other day you showed up here, because we know some common people. But also, this interview is one of my least prepared ones because we just decided this morning that we're gonna do it. Yeah. So let's go over your background just a little bit. You talk about the States. Some Hawaii stuff. You also had this interesting statistic you talked about the other day.
Well,
or a record or whatever.
Yeah, I'm not even sure which one you mean right now, but
we'll get to it.
Yeah, but we were talking about a volleyball background now.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Yeah, so basically I started playing indoor volleyball when I was 12, around there, maybe a year earlier or later. I'm not really sure. It started all as sort of like an extracurricular activity in school, you know, when you're trying all kinds of different sports. Then I joined the club team, and basically during the year or the school year, we played indoor volleyball. During the summer, we were on playing beach volleyball. And then when I was finished my high school, I got a scholarship offer to play in University of Hawaii. And then I spent 5 years playing their college ball, which was a great experience. My first year I redshirted, which meant I only trained with the team. And then I still got my 4 years to compete. It was one of the best times, and I think, I could talk about that forever as well. And then afterwards, I still played for a couple more years indoor professionally, while always combining it with beach volleyball over the summer. And actually, when I was done in Hawaii in 2011, that was my first touchdown in Sweden. Björn Berry was then sort of looking for a partner on the for the Swedish beach tour, and we worked with. Slovenia has had during the past summers a coach from Umeå, which was Isak Hermansson.
Oh yeah.
So I trained with Isak quite a lot, and he put me in contact with Björn, and we had a couple of only Skype conversations, and then we decided to play together for a summer. Björn had obviously some sponsors. The Swedish beach tour was then 8 tournaments with even some bonus pool at the end. So it was actually sort of also, let's say, worth it, even in a financial sense. So I spent 3 months in 2011, and then we actually did another year in 2012, where I had my base here in Umeå. And we traveled around in Sweden, for the 3 months and played the tournament. So I played mainly the Swedish beach tour, but also a couple of challengers in between. And it was a great time. And then I was still, like I said, then during the year I would still go and play on some indoor clubs. And then I think about 5, 6, 7 years ago, I completely put indoor on the side, and I only play beach now. So that's sort of my background. And because beach doesn't necessarily pay that well, and there's also I work part-time for a Middle European Volleyball Association, so sort of the same as Nejcs, but for Middle Europe. And I do part-time. I used to sort of run the office there. Now I do more media stuff for them. I do beach camps on the side. So, because like I said, beach volleyball, you can sort of live off of it if you're in the top maybe 20, and also depending on what your federation has of a funding program. But for me, it's like, I know I want to play, and then I adjusted my life to a little bit where, I need to earn some money. So what are the jobs I can take to then be able to
combine?
Train and play? Before it was, let's say, indoor volleyball, and my beach partners, the one we play sort of on the world tour with, he still plays indoor. And then in the summer, when he's done, before he starts his next season, and he has like sort of this window, and then we just compete on the world tour, whatever tournaments come along.
So he makes his money from indoor.
Yeah, exactly.
And you sort of combine.
Yeah,
because Björn said to me the other day that you have this beach volleyball nomad kind of life. Like, I don't know, because you've been coaching here once, and like it seems like you just go from place to place. And
so if you just observe from the side, it becomes pretty messy and unorganized, and then you're like, what the hell is this guy doing? But with a little bit of a background info, it makes some more sense, because basically, so I'm from Slovenia. And for me in winter, it's just not a great spot for training. A few years ago, there was the first indoor facility that opened. So now there's basically a spot where you could train in Slovenia, but it still doesn't have the proper structure around it. So, you could now possibly find a coach, you could possibly find some guys to train with, but it's a little bit of a struggle, and it will also be financially quite demanding. So it's just not worth it staying there. So it's easier for me to kind of join other either clubs or teams or setups that are already existing, and just join them as a training partner. And luckily I've been in a position where people thought that it maybe adds a little bit of a value or whatever that I joined them. So I've been fortunate to go and train, I don't know, in Australia, train in Germany, train in Spain, train in Sweden, Norway, wherever it is that you can join somebody who's already training. And it's been...
That's good. That's good. So people are welcoming, and there's always it's always interesting to have people from different places.
And for me, it's also been not just for training. It's also like you're at different places. So you also see what the structures there are, how it functions, what the setups are. So you're also taking valuable lessons from it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that's just traveling in general. Like I love being in different places because you always learn something. The things you would least expect to learn, you end up learning.
Yeah, and then you also see, everybody has a little bit. So, for example, I'm just going to throw this out, but I think Sweden is, when it comes to beach volleyball, it's actually at least in one area, it's one of the more developed ones, and that is sort of. Most other countries do not have as many beach volleyball clubs. Most of the other countries do not have basically the opportunity to play beach volleyball 12 months of the year because there's not maybe so many indoor facilities. But on the other hand, Sweden has this sort of, this has developed on a little bit more of a leisure level. It's not necessarily on a developing high talent performance.
Yeah.
So you have a lot of recreational players, but you don't maybe necessarily have that many players striving for, necessarily the Olympics or stuff like that.
Yeah.
So in one sense, Sweden has, removed the hurdles or barriers to entry, because you can, you're up here in Umeå, you can go to play in Iksu. Maybe it's not always organized training, but it's more so than in other countries a lot of times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have such a love-hate relationship with this place. I mean, this is partly my hometown, and probably because of the beach volleyball indoor facility here and everything is probably why I started playing in the first place, because it existed in the city and I just happened to be from here. But I agree, like this might be one of the cheapest indoor facilities in the fucking world.
Yeah.
Right now it's 60 euros a month and you play as much as you want.
Yeah.
Like that's unheard of. And that's, I think, because of the structure of the place, which is that it's not necessarily for profit. It's kind of a, I don't know what they're called in English, but it's like kind of a non-profit organization type of thing. So it just, when they make money, the place grows. So last year or 2 years ago, they built this huge climbing facility because they just had a bunch of money, and the place just keeps growing. I think it's the biggest sports center in Europe.
I know that when I got here, it was advertised as like the biggest sports center in Northern Europe.
Okay.
I don't know now how it refers to the rest of Europe, but also just mention, like you mentioned the price now, 60 euros, and you can play as much as you want. So for example, for me in Slovenia, that's 2 hours.
Yeah.
Because you have to pay per hour, and then maybe if you go like a little bit in the downtime, so sort of early in the day, or then maybe you can get 4 or 5 hours out of it. If you go, for example, to Munich, this is 1 hour.
Yeah.
So it all depends.
Exactly, it's ridiculous in some ways. Then on the other hand, you're stuck in like northern Sweden. It's okay. Today we have the sun out, but you barely see the sun for many months out of the year, and it's freezing cold and whatnot. And then there's also the other aspect of it being so cheap, which is it's cheap because of basically Sweden is sort of kind of left in politically, which makes certain things like easily accessible, but as you say, I think that also has to do with it's not easy to try to become a lot better than a lot of other people here. It's sort of the whole culture is sort of against that.
Yeah, I think so a little bit. I think what Sweden values is very much this, that people are equal.
Yeah.
And when it comes to sports as well, like what Sweden values high is that the healthy lifestyle.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure, this is not something where I want to make a statement. I don't know if it's if you go into sort of this elite level of sports, if this is unhealthy or not. But you can definitely feel that a lot of people are willing to spend money for like something that makes them feel better, something that they move. But this is maybe then, like once, twice a week, maybe they do like different activities every day, but it's not something where they train, twice a day or,
Yeah, exactly.
So,
yeah, absolutely. These are complicated questions and can become heated also, so let's not go into them.
But for me, it was also great to be in Sweden because I think I'm going to call this the Western model, where, people pay I still think it's a little bit Western because it's a lot for like people who are working and they pay for every time they visit. Well, for example, I come from Slovenia, which on the other sense, it's like if you're not in that talent pool, then a lot of times you don't have the opportunity. And one of these examples is like indoor volleyball. So for example, everybody starts playing indoor volleyball at a certain young age. And then if you're not in this like sort of like a high talent, or if you're not useful for the team, other times you get not kicked out, but you get sort of pushed to the side, and sooner or later you don't even have the opportunity to exercise the sport anymore.
Okay.
So everything is catered towards this, like we're going to be in the sort of like the Allsvenskan or the Elitserien or whatever. And if you're not there, then a lot of times you don't have this opportunity. There's not many teams that are just there for, you know, like anybody can join and anybody can get training. But also in a business model, if you can combine the two, that's sort of the ideal business model for any kind of sport. And I'm seeing now this, for example, in Sweden, you focus on this like, okay, whoever can pay can join, but we don't care how good they get. And on the other side, you have like Slovenia or maybe like more south of Europe, wherever you go, where you know, they're focusing only on this talent pool side of it.
Exactly, and if you go too hard on one side and ignore the other, then because one could probably argue that it, you know, having top players is also good marketing for the sport, which will make people play. Like this, you know, politically, before the pandemic, I coached in Norway because. For me, it was easier to actually make a living out of it there, because here it's a little bit more of like, oh, everyone should coach equal amounts type of thing. Like, you're in a sense not allowed to be better than anyone else. It should be equal. So it became hard to make a living here from coaching, because I just wouldn't get enough hours. Like, or I can always do my own marketing, but that also takes a lot of time, which I'm doing with the project and everything. But in a sense, they have, and now with Mo and Sorum, like they have such an explosion there, because they also have a lot of recreational players, but they also have the top players, which just markets the sport, and it's this perfect combination. In a sense, they just have lack of courts and coaches in general in that country, because everyone wants to play the type of thing.
Yeah, they definitely got a lot of publicity now.
Exactly.
So we should definitely see quite a lot of beach volleyball players in Norway, but
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but that's also a little bit of this mentality thing, and this was a sort of an example. There's people who approach coaches and say, you know, we pay this and this much, but then it's also, you're not looking for that specific person, you're just looking for a coach in general. You know, for example, I want to drive a Ferrari too, but if I can only pay for, you know, a small Fiat, then obviously I'm not going to drive a Ferrari. And it's the same thing with anything in life. You get what you pay for. So, and if we're not willing to sometimes invest a little bit more, then obviously we're not going to get the best talent. And
exactly, because you can't just hire a coach, because there's no, anyone can be a coach, and anyone can start some drills, and then that's it. But but what does it produce? That's the question. Anyway, the record thing I was gonna talk about, which was you said, because we talked about Björn, he talked about he maybe wanted to try to win a Swedish championship after 50 next year.
Oh, okay.
And you said you also think you have a record. It was the most different national tour wins.
Yeah, but this came like, there's just somehow like FIVB and whoever else, they're like trying to sort of catch up, I guess, with the rest of with other sports. And they're coming up with statistics, who has played the most tournament and stuff like that. And then it was in one conversation came up that we started counting how many different national tours we've played and actually won. And I think right now it's 9 national tours for me. So it's been, you know, having this beach nomad life. You just play in a lot of different tournaments. And it's been with different partners as well, obviously, but yeah. So it's been other countries that I've played, and even some state tours and stuff like that. But this is just, it's part of that training in the winter where I'm not playing indoor, or I'm not able to play on the world tour because my partner's playing indoor. And it's just, you just go around and you can play different national tours. So that's nice. But it would be interesting to know, because I mean, most of the top players, they don't play that many national tours, so they obviously haven't won so many different ones.
Exactly.
So I'm sort of in this in-between level where probably, or maybe I even do have this worldwide record, who knows?
Yeah, that would be cool. So wait, Slovenia, is there other players than you and your partner?
I mean, there's always players that are coming up, but there's nobody who's really doing it full time.
So you guys are the official national team, or?
Yeah, and that's also, I think that's also quite of a interesting debate always in beach volleyball, like what is a national team?
That's true.
You know, so as soon as you apply for one of those World Tour events, you're basically representing your country. I mean, you have to get signed up through your federation, and at the end of the day, you can only play with somebody from the same country because it counts for the Olympic points. And as soon as it counts for the Olympic points or the world ranking, it has to be the same country, because that's how it runs.
Yeah.
So technically, as soon as you sign up for a world tour or even a European tour, you're basically representing your country, and in a sense, you are the national team. So now there's a little bit of, you know, people look at things differently, and now we have this Continental Cup competition as well, which is sort of just for the Olympic qualifier, you get 15 teams that get through the world ranking, and then there's the world championships and the host or whatever. But there's also this extra spots that get given to each continent. Each continent gets one additional spot, and this is the Continental Cup. It's sort of like a Davis Cup format. 2 teams from the same country play against 2 teams from the other country, and you sort of earn that additional spot, but it's just an additional spot. But some federations who are less active, let's call it this way, they call this now the national team competition, because it's sort of like 2 beach volleyball teams against 2 beach volleyball teams. But in a sense, the actual national team has always been the World Tour. You know, it's Brazil against USA, or whatever other country is there. So yeah.
But Slovenia has a lot of indoor.
Yes, we have a very
players,
strong,
and good players.
Yeah, especially now we had. I've been very fortunate. I think I am from this generation that sort of started the indoor push, but not because of me. But we have this one player who is just extraordinary. So Tine Urnaut, we were on the junior national team, youth junior national team together, and he's been always one of the world's best. He comes from a big volleyball family. His brothers, father, mom, they all played volleyball, and they were all in the Europe's top. And he was sort of like the driving force of our generation. And he's now been, the past 10, 15 years, he's been the captain of our national team. And basically in the last 3 out of the 4 European championships, Slovenia has finished second in indoor volleyball. And, you know, in all 4 of the last Euros, they beat Poland, for example, and knocked Poland out of the competition, which is a powerhouse.
Yeah.
And I think in 3 of them, they beat Russia. In 2 of them, I think they beat Italy. So,
Okay.
you know, they're obviously there. And if you played 3 out of the last 4 finals, you're obviously a volleyball powerhouse.
Yeah.
They basically missed the Olympics by 2 matches. They lost in the semifinal against France to qualify for the Olympics. And France ended up winning the qualifier, ended up winning the Olympics as well.
Yeah.
So, and they lost in 5 sets. So it was, you know, a very close match, obviously. So they are a powerhouse now. The men's national team in Slovenia, they are an absolute force.
Okay.
So there's also not really to be expected that young players are going to decide to go and play beach volleyball that has absolutely no structure.
I see.
While on the other side, you have indoor that is, you know,
it's very attractive to stay on the indoor side.
Yes, once you have, I mean, and also now because of the successes of the national team, obviously the value of the players is going up as well. So also the financial incentives to play indoor volleyball are also becoming bigger and bigger. And I just put it like this, the value of Slovenian players is going up because of those successes.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I mean, they obviously earned it, but
yeah.
So, yeah.
Interesting. So your prediction is not a lot of other Slovenian players coming up on the beach volleyball side?
I think my prediction for the world is that in the next 10, 20 years, we're going to see a slow but consistent development in the quantity of beach volleyball players. I think beach volleyball is very attractive, but I think worldwide it's missing structure. So although we're going to see maybe a dip in the top level, just because we don't have sustainable business models yet, I see that more and more it's attractive for a lot of players.
Yeah.
And one of this is sort of the easiness of the sport. Friendly, attractive. I call it an entry-level lifestyle sport. So most other lifestyle sports, for example, what are lifestyle sports for you? Anything from surfing, yeah,
snowboarding,
yeah, like freestyle skiing or whatever.
Yeah.
But all of them require either a lot of equipment or a special place. And beach volleyball gives you that same feeling, the same hype. But you can have a beach volleyball court anywhere. You don't have to go to a world-renowned beach. You don't have to wait for special conditions. You don't have to go to a special mountain, but you can do it. So basically, Umeå has, what is it called, Slottsskogen or what? No, what is it?
Skogis.
Skogis, yeah, exactly.
Outside of Vik.
Yeah, so it's just like, somebody built 3 courts, and on a sunny day you go there in your sort of shorts and you feel like you're somewhere at the beach, although the surroundings is not always perfect, but it gives you that it's like this entry-level lifestyle sport. So a lot of people want to do it, a lot of people enjoy it, so a lot of people tend to try it. So I think it's very attractive, and more people are able to do it. And the problem what has been holding on there's some barriers to entry, because if you want to play it, you have to find friends, you have to find coaches, you have to find equipment, which is not much, but you still have to find it. So there's not a lot of kids doing it. So as soon as we're going to get more clubs, in a sense, or organizations offering it, it's going to be easier for more people to try it, and more people are going to get hooked, because it's an easy sport to get hooked.
Yeah, it is.
And I think also for the spectators, as soon as they get to know it a bit better, they enjoy it, they love it.
Yeah.
But I mean, honestly, I don't want to watch one camera stream from the World Tour, because it's boring.
Yeah.
And if I don't know much about the sport, I don't know what's going on. I'm just watching four statues moving, and I don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
So obviously the beach volleyball world needs to improve what they're sending to the world, and has to lower the barriers to entry. But I think that's going to be happening now in the next 10 years, and we're seeing different stuff of it happening already.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people that want to make things better. So I think sooner or later it will happen. That's true. And yeah, beach volleyball is really fun to watch. Like, it's very athletic, and if you know a little bit about it, or if you have a good commentator that explains a little bit about it, then it becomes, I think, fun for pretty much anyone to watch.
Yeah, and I don't know how much of that you've seen, but for example, in Germany now you've had Alex Walkenhorst. So,
they had this Corona Tour type of thing. Yeah,
so basically it was always a league format. So he got a bunch of teams together. I think it was always 8, but it doesn't matter. So he got a bunch of teams, and instead of playing a tournament, they did a set schedule of like everybody playing against everybody twice, and then they played a playoff, which for him was easier because he could make a fixed schedule from the beginning to the end. It wasn't depending on if you're winning or losing, except for that very end part of it. That was one benefit. And the other benefit was like he had the teams there, but what he changed and what was the biggest thing was that they didn't necessarily, they had multiple cameras, and it was a broadcast thing. It maybe wasn't TV quality, but they put 2 commentators next to it that were explaining the game to a very, very high, in-depth level. And I think that's what sort of changed the game there. Because now, for example, if my mom was watching, she knew what was going on. She could almost feel like a coach. And I think that's the most important if you want to attract people. So, if I always give this example that I went to a baseball game and I thought it was the most boring sport ever. And then the next time I went with dad of one of my teammates who was sort of like a major league scout. And he was explaining me all of the insights. And, I found it fascinating because it was so much new knowledge, and, all of a sudden, like, I was like, yeah, but why are they doing this? This is not, he should do this. And then I was...
You get involved.
Yeah, you get involved, you get excited about it because you know what's going on. You feel like an expert, although I still don't know anything about baseball.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing for beach volleyball. If you have 2 experts explaining you the game, and the good part about them was that it was on Twitch, so people could ask questions, and if there was like for example, a good question, they would answer it and stuff like that. So, you as a spectator in front of the screen, you felt like you know the game. And then of course it becomes interesting. You know the players, you know the game. You're like, yeah. But if I'm just watching 4 people move around and I have no clue what they're doing, I don't even understand the rules, then it's not that interesting. So I think they just showed the way that it's maybe not always about the cameras and the quality of the cameras. I mean, it has to be a certain level, of course.
Of course.
But it's more about this, you know, how much can I feel like I have all the info and I'm the I'm the expert. So
exactly. And I think in general people like learning stuff. Like I thought about this, you know, Formula One is apparently one of these sports that just somehow became like a big public sport. And I'm immersed in Finland, and Finland had one of these. No, they had 2 or 3, Mika Häkkinen. They had a few like top Formula One drivers. And so I grew up with just watching this fucking car sport. Like I don't know anything about cars, but somehow. For some reason, it was like the whole nation was like hypnotized by this sport. Like everyone was always watching it, so you end up watching it as a kid also. But you learn like how they turn in turns, like how the mechanics do the pit stops and shit like that. So it's like interesting because I just think it's interesting for people to learn stuff in general.
But I also think that, you know, those sports, they made it to sort of a national TV, or they were like easily accessible to you. And I think the level of knowledge of the general population watching it was sort of determined by the commentators. So I still feel that, for example, a lot of people watch, for example, football, soccer. But if we would really check the knowledge of the people, how much they know the game tactically and technically, it would be very low, because most of the commentators that commentate soccer are just journalists. And I don't want to be mean, but it's like, I don't think like they never talk about, you know, okay, they're now playing 4-3-3. What are the sort of the chains there that the players are using? Or what switch happened? Who was responsible for that ball? Who actually made the error?
Yeah.
It's not really in depth.
No.
But sort of now the general population is at that level, and we all talk on this very general level about the sport. Oh yeah, he sucks. Oh yeah, he's great. You know. But I think it becomes way more fun, and I'm. A couple of times now I watched a soccer game now. It happens once or twice a year for me, not more. But you can see that now with technology and, you know, the studios, they're actually doing a lot more than they did 10, 15 years ago. So I feel like, okay, now they're actually highlighting, this player did this, so this switch happened, you know, and you're actually starting to get to know a little bit more in depth. And I like that.
That's cool.
Yeah. But I still think that it's a little bit determined from the commentators, because they're sort of bringing the game to us.
Yeah.
And way too often the sport has the problem that, you know, it's not it's not in depth, it's not high level.
Yeah. That makes sense. There's even more I would want to jump into in this, but
yeah, go for it.
Okay, I'll take one thing. I went to this seminar about making YouTube videos that would stick with people because I make YouTube videos, and one of the core concepts of it was take something that is familiar to people and combine it with something that they don't know. So, for example, you're drinking coffee. Like, a lot of people know what coffee is, but maybe not a lot of people know. This is just a stupid example. Drink coffee so that it becomes dangerous for you.
Okay.
So if you have a video title that's like 10 ways to drink coffee that becomes dangerous for you, then it's like people know what it's about. It's not about this random topic that they have no idea about, but it also creates curiosity. And I'm wondering if, for example, the Formula One, like, a lot of people can drive cars, but they don't know how to drive cars fast or whatever. And maybe the commentators should also think about this, like, how much does the general public know? So we need to give them something that they can recognize, but then we also need to give them something new.
Yeah, I think I would enjoy a lot if, for example, now with Formula One, the commentators would also tell more about, you know, the technical stuff when they're driving. You know, because just there, most of the drivers are pretty much at a very high level of it. So you don't really talk so much about, you know, I don't know, for example, when we went go-karting, they had to tell us what side to lean on. so that you get more weight on the tire that you want. And like they always talk about they're warming up the tires, but I never got like an in-depth explanation of like when the tires are warm, when the tires are cold, what that kind of a stuff. So I'm very general, like I know the terms, but I don't know anything really about it. If you think about it, it's just like we're sort of like scraping this tip of the iceberg. We have those terms out there and we feel like we know something.
Yep.
But we're all there. Not many of us know much more.
Exactly.
There's a few people who love cars and they know more about it.
Yeah.
There's a few people that are probably mechanics and they know a lot more about it. But in general, and this is just my observation and it could be wrong, but I think we're generally pretty dumb when we're watching Formula One.
Yeah.
And I think we're also, in general, I think we're pretty dumb when we're watching soccer. Obviously, there's a lot of people who have trained soccer at one stage. I have played it as well. But still, I was a kid. I was between 6 and 9. You don't train anything there. The knowledge you have about the sport is non-existent, basically.
Exactly.
You're just standing there because the coach told you to stand there. You don't know why. You don't know what you're supposed to do. And now I'm watching soccer and I'm not supposed to be this expert. But I see that basically all of the biases I have about soccer have basically been formed around from other commentators, people that I've watched with, and hopefully at one point there's somebody who's an expert and explain me a little bit more about it.
Yeah, interesting. All right, so let's go into beach volleyball. let's take the stuff that the listeners know something about, but then also add something new to their minds.
Okay, let's be YouTube efficient.
Exactly. So, I mean, you probably don't know it, but you have coached me a few years ago. You're the first coach that ever while coaching me flicked out your phone, recorded me doing something, and then came and asked me to come to the side and showed me the video in slow motion, back and forth.
I don't do this often, so this.
Exactly, and I've completely stolen that technique.
Yeah.
Like it's. I think it's the best video feedback way I've found to do it. Especially when you can scroll back and forth on the phone, and you just show like straight after someone does it. It's so much more clear to see what you're doing wrong rather than having the coach just try to explain that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, first I'm happy that it was something that it was a positive impression that you got.
Yeah.
Because I was now afraid,
nervous,
you told me this and this, and I'm like, oh shit, I hope, I'm pretty sure I've developed since then as well. So hopefully I didn't say something really stupid. But yeah, okay. So it's a good start.
It's a good start, yeah. No, do you have any, I mean, you seem to, I don't know you super well, but you seem to be a thinker. Like so far in this episode, we have heard that you have a lot of thoughts about things. Is there anything in beach volleyball that you're like, I wish more people would understand this, or common mistakes that you think, common misunderstandings? Is there anything that you?
No, I don't know. I think it might we'll talk about it more, and maybe there's be something really specific that will turn up. But for me, it's like I've just kind of fell in love with the sport and I love doing it. Yeah. And then also, I think it was a way to improve my game. And I was also sort of like on the same hunt as you are, like what is the most efficient way, how do I learn better, and for the best coaches and stuff like that. So I was probably, or still am, on the very similar path than you are.
Yeah.
I don't want to be wasting too much time. I want to get better, and that's sort of the path that I'm on. But there are also, let's call it, periods in that sense. So, whenever somebody says, you've coached me a while ago, or we did a session together, or you shared this opinion of yours, it's always a little bit dangerous, because I also think now I know more than I did back then. So hopefully I didn't say back then something that is not something that I wouldn't do anymore.
That you cannot stand for anymore. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But on the other hand, I also look at it back in a sense where, also when you're coaching, I wouldn't necessarily teach a national team player exactly the same as I would teach a beginner.
That's true.
So I think there's also stages, and you know, maybe it might be only my defense mechanism now trying to justify the way I coached like 5 or 10 years ago. But it's also, I think you have to go through certain stages.
Absolutely.
So yeah,
I have this same problem. Like I know that I as a player and a coach, I will evolve. I have evolved. I will change my mind about things. So some YouTube videos are sometimes kind of a mental struggle, because I want to create a video that I'm proud of today, but I also want to. Sometimes there's corners of it that I feel like this might be something that I might change my mind a little bit about in the next few years once I get more time looking into it. So then I kind of have to choose words that allow me to change my mind one day. Or I explain like, this is maybe good for more beginner, intermediate, whatever, and maybe other people should do something else. Just so I'm clear about that. So I'm not saying that this is the way and this is the only way and everyone should do it.
Yeah, and I also think now that I look back at it, I don't think there was like so much, even if somebody was a little bit in a different philosophy. So, you know, there's always like different philosophies on like, you know, passing, should you be fronting, should you take the ball in front of you, should you take it lateral on the side? Or same thing with like setting, there's always like, you know, should you face, is it okay to, you know, do a side set? Is it should it become more out of your legs, should it come more out of your arms? There's always different schools of thoughts or whatever it is. But I think, you know, as soon as like somebody has a lot of body awareness, and the more you have trained to do something, it's also easier for you probably to change, in a sense that you have more body control. You might have programmed yourself into something that is different. So you might have been, I don't know, programming yourself to use a lot of your legs when you're setting, and then at one point you want to change to more arms. It's harder because you have automated something, but at the same time you have more body awareness, so it's also easier to change. So it's always a little bit of a trade-off as well. So I don't think any of those necessarily set you back for a lot.
Yeah, I agree, and I'm more and more thinking that being all round is good. So I think there's times, for example, when it's good to face where you're setting, and then I think there's times when you cannot, like it's physically impossible. So why not actually train both and like gain both skills, and then it's more about like what situation should you do what in.
I mean, yeah, I think there's also, I mean, especially when we talk about coaching, I mean, there's going to be always people coming and just deciding that something is easier, and might not even having like a scientific background. So obviously there's going to be a situation where you're going to just run after a ball that's going to be outside of the court and it's impossible to face. So should we just let the ball drop, or is there also something you can do to control that ball better? So I think we just need to talk a little bit more about principles, not necessarily just like you always have to face when you're setting, because it's not going to be impossible. So if I can only set the balls when I'm facing, then, you know, obviously I might even half of the balls that are being, you know, passed my way, I should better just catch and throw it to the opponent. So, and you know, I've talked to coaches, and they are good coaches, and they tell you like, you should always try to face. Yeah, you should try, but it's not going to be possible. What should I do when it's not possible? Yeah, you should still try. Okay, but I'm not going to, okay, I agree. I tried, I didn't make it. So what now? What can I do? Try. Okay, this is not the best coaching advice right now, you know, but there's something about, you know, facing the platform towards the target, or, you know, tilting the upper body, or whatever the what do you want to call it, the handset to face the target. But, you know, there's stuff you can do, and there's stuff that is biomechanically more efficient, you know, just like going for the easy way out. It's like, yeah, you should try. Yeah, okay, well, I'm trying hard, you know.
In a sense, that's lazy coaching.
Yeah, or it's just like, you know, then it's also okay to say like, then I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
But there's also people who are trying, you know, like they're probably 180 degrees away from the target, and then while they're making the contact, they try to make sometimes up to 180 degrees turn while setting. And, you know, this is probably not going to be very accurate.
No.
Because at that point, you're trying to do a giant rotation and obviously your precision is going to be determined by where your either platform or where your extension goes to. So that's your precision, right? Yeah. And if you're making a 180 degree spin while you're doing that, it's probably not going to be very accurate. You're probably better just like facing 180 degrees away and setting it basically over yourself.
Absolutely, yeah.
You know, so basically that you should try to face is a pretty shitty advice there.
Yeah.
You're actually like making somebody less accurate because you're trying to make them do something that is not efficient.
Mm-hmm.
So there are certain ways of being more efficient. So yeah.
Absolutely. I've done a lot of hours of setting into basketball hoops, and at one point that experimentation became into, can I do this backwards? And after a while I realized that I can watch the lines on the floor that's in front of me when I'm facing with my back towards the hoop, and I can calculate, because I know how the lines look like on the floor. I can calculate from what I see in front of me sort of where the basket is without seeing it. So I kind of created this concept of like blind 3D mapping, like from knowing the place you are in, from seeing what you have in front of you, to trying to imagine, to also be able to visualize where things are behind you.
But I think that's, and I've thought about it maybe a little bit more now in the recent days as well, because we had some interesting conversation along this. But I don't know about you, but we've always defined volleyball as a motor visual sport. So visual part is that you see something, so it's the ball flying towards you or whatever, and then you apply a certain motor program for it. May it be the pass, may it be the set, may it be a spike, whatever it is. But it's always it's always reactive to what you see. And in training, we focus so much more on just the motor side of it. And there's very little cues, and very few coaches talk about the visual part. Like, what do you see, what do you take? And this was now maybe not a one-for-one example from you, because this is a little bit more, okay, how do I, but a lot of times I don't need to see exactly where I'm standing. I don't need to look down to see where I'm standing, because I'm taking my surrounding. And I know, because the net is there, I know where I need to set the ball, or, I know where I am in the space. And so, and maybe this was a little bit a different topic also, like when you're in indoor volleyball, you come to different gyms, right? So sometimes, people struggle with away games so much because you're used to your own gym and you know where the walls are, the distances, you have this depth perception a little bit different. And then you come either to a smaller or a bigger gym, and you're so lost. It's so difficult for you because basically those markers are gone. So basically you should take your orientation only on the net, antennas, and the lines.
Interesting. So you think maybe thinking about the surroundings could actually hurt you in a sense? I
mean, because, I don't know how much you've done of this, but you come to like one of the biggest problems for most indoor volleyball players, I think, is like coming into like a giant gym. You come into this giant stadium where like the ceiling is like, I don't know, sky high. You can actually do a sky ball in it. Oh, you're so lost because the ball goes up high and you're like looking through it, and like it's so hard, right? So it becomes a little bit of a thing. That's why also like home court is important. Like a lot of times we don't even think about that, but having what are your markers to know your position in space, or like to see the ball flying at you, like what do you take in account? And then also like when it comes to the next thing is like you have an example here of Björn, and I asked him that a couple of days ago, like, Björn, what makes you such a great passer? And what are you doing different than other people? And it's hard to point out something in the technical part, but his answer was as well, is like, I just think I read the ball better probably than most people. And it's probably the thing, if you would go and now analyze, and you can like slow-mo his passing form and whatever, what makes it so much better? It would be hard to pinpoint something, but he just makes better decisions because he estimates the flight curve probably a bit sooner, a bit better. So that's what makes him at the end a better passer. So it's also about this visual part, and so now we tackled two different visual parts. One is like knowing where you stand, and the other one is actually reading the ball. But I think the visual part is very, very important.
Absolutely.
And the top players are obviously going to do it better. And one thing, it comes from having a lot more repetitions. But the other part is now also that they know what they do. And a lot of times it's also like in their subconscious, just because they've done it so many times, they don't even know what they're doing differently. They just see the ball flying and they already know it's going to be here. While, you know, a beginner is like sees the ball flying and he runs towards the ball most of the time, and then he crashes or like hits him into the head, the chest, whatever. But you know, and it's not that the person is, and they might have the same motor program. They might both have a pretty good platform ready, but they position it differently.
Absolutely, yeah. It was fun that indoor volleyball, like different halls and people. I think the beach volleyball equivalent to that is when you play at midday on a court that has no trees and nothing surrounding it. So the sun is just blasting from straight up. So there's no shadows. There's nothing pointing south-north. Sometimes I've had that feeling that now I'm completely lost because I have no idea what I'm doing. Yeah. It's much easier if the sun is coming from an angle. There's some trees that create some shade, that creates, you know, just the surrounding. Yeah. And also here when we play indoor, like the indoor beach volleyball, you also always have stuff around you. So it's just way easier to know where you are.
For me, I guess it's really trippy for me. When you set up a court on the beach and it's not aligned with basically the buildings in the background, but not that it's like 90 degrees to it, but it's just a little bit crooked.
Okay.
Because then sort of like the buildings in the background, they give you a little bit of a perception of what is straight. And for me, this is like, then I always like this sideline is terrible for me.
Yeah.
So this is something that you just kind of take in account, and I don't know, but yeah.
That's interesting.
But for most of the other ones, like the one that you mentioned, like with the sun, and that one don't bug me so much. But for me, it's like this one. We had it a couple of times where we set up, like really on the beach, you set up a court, and it could be that it wasn't perfectly aligned. You know, you just like, it should be like this, but it was a couple of a degrees maybe off.
Yeah.
And then
that made it difficult.
Yeah, because you can basically, whenever I'm looking to the other side, I am automatically take those buildings also
into account.
Yeah, and then if it's maybe the lines were just a little bit crooked, I'm not saying maybe it wasn't a regulation court, but I struggled with that one so much.
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah. I had this. I'm thinking I'm gonna make a YouTube video of it one day. I haven't yet. But it's like called the what the fuck checklist. It's like when things just don't work the way they used to do, like a checklist of things that could be wrong. This sounds like a perfect candidate for that checklist. Like, this court just fucked up compared to the surroundings? But one of the things on that checklist would be also is the court actually flat? Like, or sometimes one side of the court is higher than the other, which, especially on a beach, which you don't necessarily always think about it. Like you're there and you just, you get stupid and then you get angry because things don't work and then you get even stupider. So then you also get a more and more difficult time realizing this. Because it makes basically the court becomes longer on one side and shorter on the other. So it's you have to serve way differently depending on where you're serving from. Yeah.
But I guess I don't know how that's for me at least. But I mean, obviously we've played immense amounts of beach volleyball. But then it's sort of like already your intuition tells you like something is wrong.
Yeah.
And then you sort of like realize. And again, we set up on the beach, and then I was like, oh, I'm almost like running uphill when I'm serving from one end, and it really was like that court was just like, it was just outside of the court, and it was a little bit like, then you had to go, and it felt like it was so much tougher to serve from that side, so then I always went like a little bit to the side where it wasn't. And a similar feeling that I had was at the beginning, I never played with sunglasses. And the reason, and I think it's a lot of people who are not used to playing with sunglasses, they say that it changes a little bit their perception, their optics a little bit.
Yeah.
And for me, it was like whenever I had sunglasses and I looked down, it was like almost like I was tripping in the sand, because it like almost felt like, I don't know, it made it bigger or something, but like it was, the depth perception was a little bit different.
Yeah.
So I was like, whoa, I cannot play with sunglasses. Now I cannot go without sunglasses, but it took me a little bit to adapt that like I'm actually wearing sunglasses, because the perception of what I was seeing was so different.
Yeah.
And I just couldn't get a hold of it. But then I forced myself a little bit, and now it's like I could almost not play without it.
And then your body adapted to that, like lens change or whatever it might be. Because I've only played with cheap sunglasses. I don't feel they give that effect. But sometimes when I borrow people's more fancy ones, I can sometimes feel like, oh shit, this is making me dizzy, or or something. So yeah, maybe there's something to that. But you're saying that you at least get used to it after a while.
Yeah, I just forced you sooner or later come to a game where it's basically impossible to play without sunglasses because it's so bright, or it's like you're looking right into the sun, that then you're just forced. Yeah. And the funny thing is, I also talked to Simon Dahl about this, and he was similar. He couldn't play with sunglasses, and then he mentioned it, and I think it might have been even the Olympics. It was just so bright, and even the sand was so bright that he had to play with it. And for me, it was similar. It was just like a national championship, though. I couldn't play without it. I ended up having one of my best games. And he said himself that, like, although he was not used to it, he still played very well. So it was just like this, you didn't feel well, but it didn't really maybe affect your performance that much.
Okay.
But after that, he said he started playing with, I think, sunglasses, but don't ask him. But for me, it was then I started playing more often. So it was a little bit like sometimes I was using it as an excuse. I'm not performing because I cannot see well. But I think it took me maybe like a month, and then it was,
Okay.
And then it was really good.
Interesting. Yeah. So are there some things that stick out to you extra, like of things that you have changed your mind about in the latest years? Is there, or something where you got a deeper understanding, or?
Yeah, I think, the things that I'm trying to do nowadays in training, I think not all of it I was trying to do 10 years ago. I think, by, let's say, going around and having different coaches and training in different environments, I think the picture has crystallized a lot more and a lot more in depth on what I want to do.
Are these secrets that you want to keep to yourself, or are some of them?
No, I mean, for me, it's not a big secret. So I don't know.
Because I think that's an interesting topic in itself. Like I've talked with different people on this podcast, and some people think that there's no secrets. You should just explain everything, and some people say that no, it's actually good for the sport if we keep some secrets and make like top players should keep their secrets from other top players because it gives them an advantage.
Yeah, but I don't think there's but there's going to be differences. So like if we go back to passing, for example, right? So I guess one of the biggest basic questions in passing is it going to be if you always want to get your body behind the ball, or if you want to pass on the side.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that was like a topic for you or not.
Yeah, it definitely has been something I've been thinking about.
Okay.
My thinking nowadays is it's kind of like the setting. Like, yeah, if it's an easy ball and you can get your body behind it, then sure. But a lot of times it's not realistic.
Okay. But then also becomes a question. So where is this line between easy enough and not easy enough that you switch from one to the other?
That's a good question. In one way, I would say it comes by experimentation and seeing, like trying to get behind the ball as much as possible, and by experience seeing and learning what type of serves it's not possible doing with anymore. So it becomes like a.
So, but you're saying that passing on the side is a bit harder.
That's a good question. Not necessarily, but passing when the ball is too high towards your chest or too short, that's harder for sure, according to me. Because there comes a point when you cannot reach the ball anymore because it's in front of you.
Or you cannot get out of the way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this is for me the biggest one. On float serves, this is, I think, the biggest one for me. Not necessarily the side to side is not so bad to adapt to, but when it dives down or rises up, that's does that make sense?
Yeah, but it's still then like if you don't think that passing on the side is, for example, tougher, then why do you even choose to? You could also take the easy ones on the side, and then doesn't matter how difficult or easy it is, you always just pass on the side because It doesn't make a difference.
Yeah.
So why do you have a two-stage process, you know? So, and I think it's always going to depend, you know, obviously if you're shorter, it becomes a little bit easier, because even if you're passing on the side, it's not that far away from your body. So if you're somebody who's 2 meters and 10 and you pass the ball on the side, obviously, you know, it's a bigger distance from you away.
Yeah.
So it becomes a little bit harder, but
I think, okay, now when you say it this way, I think because so bump setting has a higher requirement for accuracy than passing.
yes.
Serve receive, you just sort of need to get to a somewhat good position so someone can set you. The better the position
that's debatable again. Yeah.
Okay. The better the position is, the better.
Yeah.
But you can still play inside out even on a semi-bad serve receive if you have a good setter.
Yeah. But in the long term, you're probably going to lose because of that as well.
Of course, absolutely. So of course, always strive for the best. So if there's a free ball coming over, I think it's easier to have this good accuracy if you take it in the center. That's my experience, at least.
Yeah.
So therefore move your legs to the position. But then if it's a more difficult serve, at least my aim at this point in my career is to make the ball playable, which is make it good enough so that my partner can set the ball.
Yeah. But for example, now, because I know that the easy balls, for example, you're going to try to get behind it, I might just play, if I have to play a free ball against you, I might just play it long on the back line. So you really have to work hard to get there, and it throws off your whole approach, because you're going to have to work so much more to get back, for example. So then the free ball might not actually be as easy anymore.
That's a good point. That's a good point. And that could be a strategy against someone that thinks like that, actually.
Yeah.
Now when you say that, I actually think that I don't follow my advice there, and I think I do turn around and get the ball up.
Yeah.
But I'm not actually sure how I do in those.
Yeah. Well, and I think sometimes we have those general, like we're trying to teach somebody, for example, to get behind the ball, but we're not really considering what actually happens in the game. So I think, you know, I think there's a little bit more of general principles that we need to stick to. And, you know, when we talk, I think a lot of it is also with the visual. It's related, so it's hard to say. But for example, when you said, okay, what am I focusing on when I'm passing? So obviously I want to have the platform facing towards the target, and then, you know, I want to get there with a simple and basic move as possible. And I don't even try to differentiate between an easy and a hard ball. It's just like, you know, it should be the same move for regardless what the ball is for me. I can, if I take it on the side or if I take it wherever, I can always play the ball there. It's just about the platform facing that direction. I don't try to differentiate between them.
Yeah. Do you differentiate between topspin and float?
Well, what differentiates between them for me is a little bit more that they have different outcomes. So if somebody is, you know, going for a jump serve, the curve is more predictable.
Yeah.
Because it has a spin, so it's easier for you to tell where it's going to go. At the same time, if somebody's using a spin serve, in most situations, they're going to try to put, because it's a more predictable serve, they put more power on it. By them putting more power on it, the ball will hardly ever go short. So, and if they do try to go short, they're going to take a different flight curve. So again, you can see it earlier.
Okay, yeah.
So basically, basically, as soon as it's a jump serve or a spin serve, the ball is usually going to go between 6 and 8 meters. On my side, right? Because they're putting power on it, so the ball is almost impossible for it to land before that. So
unless if it's into the wind, maybe, but
yeah,
with a Wilson.
It can be a Mikasa as well. It doesn't matter. But yeah. So, you know, like obviously in general. So now we're talking in general. The serves are going to become somewhere towards my back line. So all I have to do, in a sense, is intercept the flight ball of that ball. So it becomes a little bit more similar to a defense, I just have to move a little bit left and right and make sure my platform is in that flight curve of the ball.
Yeah.
So I think it was Karch who talked about, you know, sort of if there's a laser, if you imagine like a red laser light going from the server towards the end, I just have to put my platform into that.
Intercept that.
Yeah, intercept that.
Yeah.
And if it's a jump serve, I'm hardly ever going to have to move forward because they're putting power, and the more power they put, the less the ball is going to drop. So I basically just have to do this. So technically it becomes easier, but what makes it harder is that they put so much power on it that I don't have much time to do this.
Exactly.
Yeah. And with the float serves, they have more outcomes because they're not as powerful. So, and the ball is floating a little bit, so it could take a turn, so it's a little bit more unpredictable. So it could also drop somewhere around 4 meters maybe. So I have more to cover. For example, if they do an underarm serve, you know, it has even more outcomes because the ball is slower. So it might be really short, it might be right behind the net, or it might be on the baseline. So in this case, I will really have to move my legs more to get to the ball.
Yeah.
So in a sense, you know, my stance for a jump serve is probably going to be a bit lower than it's going to be on a float. So that's already, you know, for a float serve, I get more ready to move my legs than I am on a jump serve. On a jump serve, it's a little bit more of a, I don't know if this is a proper expression, and it's probably going to come out now wrong, but it's a little bit more of a body shift.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, you have to sort of imagine it a little bit more like that. But so there are certain differences, you know, of course, passing a jump serve or passing a float serve.
Yeah.
And I think it's just a general tendency from more players to take a float serve on the side is because of the things that you mentioned earlier. It's, you know, it can hit you, if it's a good float serve, it will float a bit more, it's a bit more unpredictable. So technically for me, it wouldn't have mattered if I can get a perfect position to it, but depth perception is a little bit of the hardest things to do.
Absolutely.
So if I get behind the ball, it's harder to have accurate depth perception. So that's why most of the players, they choose to take it a little bit on the side.
Because of the visuals.
Because of the visual, because you're watching it a little bit from the side and it's easier to determine where the ball is going to go. And the other one is also that at the end you can have a little bit more room for making minor adjustments.
Yeah.
If it's an easy one, it doesn't matter. But on the harder ones, you're just going to have, you know, it's going to be a little bit easier. There's even players who never want to take the ball
in the center.
Yeah. Just because.
Yeah, because on the side you can go above your chest level in a sense.
Even
with
like
your
that,
platform.
but it doesn't have to be that extreme. It can just be the difference between, you know, passing at hip line or chest line, basically. You know, it could just be this, and if you're having it right in front of you, this could be a giant difference.
Yeah.
If it hits your chest, it's already you have no control.
Exactly.
So. Yeah, so it's a combination of things, and I think understanding that makes easier decisions.
Yeah.
So that's why it's also, I think
that makes complete sense. The way I've thought about top spins, obviously you maybe saw the other day that I don't have a lot of experience in receiving top spin serves. But the way I think about it is also like it's easier to predict, but it comes faster. So maybe your body is more in the shape, maybe it's closer to the shape that it will be when you actually touch the ball. So maybe arms are a little bit more stretched out already before. So you just sort of move them into to intercept rather than maybe I would be more in a runner's position with bent elbows on a float serve so that I can move really efficiently and then sort of...
I think it's a little bit of a discussion of like how many different outcomes can you expect again. So if you're saying, if I'm expecting the ball to come to my sides as well, and also you said yourself that it could be even above your shoulders. So that means I have this giant area around me that I have to cover. And the more my arms are straight, the more they're going to move like a golf swing.
Exactly.
But the more they're bent, the more you can go directly there and close them together. So it's again, I mean, and I think it depends a little bit again on the level, but I think in general terms, I think there's a little bit of benefit of having them slightly bent.
Yeah.
Because if there's somebody coming with a jump serve and they might hit me, somewhere like, let's say, to my left side around shoulder height, or at least my chest height, if I have my arms straight in front of me before I get them to chest height to the side, and then it will be also hard for me to stop them. And it might turn into this golf swing, but it will also it'll be a longer route and might even be harder to stop.
Yeah.
So it might just be more beneficial to have them bent and go directly there, so it just depends.
I completely agree. And I have mine bent basically all of the time.
Yeah.
Now, what's interesting here is, so you mentioned Björn's partner, Simon Dahl, exactly. For the listeners, they played the 2 Olympics back in the days for Sweden. And Simon had this interesting theory. So you said on topspin serves, maybe you take a step back on the court because you're not expecting those short serves to really come. But Simon said he was basically good at taking these high balls where you sort of spin around and take above your shoulder level, and that sort of he does in combination with taking a step forward on the court, because then that's going to happen more often.
Of course.
But actually, in a sense, if you take that step backwards, maybe then you can a little bit expect less of those over your shoulder things happening, which could maybe. Maybe, but if it's a problem to get your elbows out in time.
Well, I mean, I think this is a little bit of an individual thing, right? I think if you would ask the general beach volleyball population, how many people are really good at taking the ball high, shoulder height or even higher, most of them would probably say they're not as good at.
Absolutely.
So, for them, it doesn't make that much sense to go and spin serves forward and then struggle because most of the balls go there.
Yeah.
This was his individual strength, so I have full support. If you feel well in this, do it, But I have no problem with him doing this, but this is, his specific thing, let's say.
I agree.
But if I struggle with those, and let's say a lot of people, when they get hit high over the shoulder, they get maybe like even aced. So, why would you want to take the same stance?
Yeah.
So, but maybe to sort of go along on this theme is the more, like, let's say you go now from somebody who is trying to take the ball midline in front of them to somebody who takes them on the side. So just if you put your arms in front of you, depending on your height and the length of your arms, you're going to be taking the ball like a meter in front of you.
Yeah.
But as soon as you start going on the side, you're going to be taking the ball maybe like 20, 30 centimeters in front of you.
That's true. Yeah.
So as soon as you even change your goal, you should also change your position a little bit, because obviously you're not going to be taking the ball at the same, so.
That's a good point.
So you're going to see that people, for example, who are trying to take the ball on the side or who always get out of the way, they're possibly standing a little bit closer to the net.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not talking about giant steps or leaps here.
No, but just a hint.
Yeah, but just maybe a half a step closer to the net, because they're gonna take a ball at a different point.
Yeah.
So it's all interconnected.
It is. Yeah. And I think it's really good to have this conversation, because it makes people start thinking more in like several layers. Because it is very interconnected. So and that's why I like also arguing against my own arguments sometimes, because it's just good. Like I mostly teach the bent elbows and I do it myself, but I also like thinking like, what are the reasons for having straight elbows, and I like being able to give the arguments for that also. So just in that sort of manner, I hope I'm not misphrasing Simon here, but
I don't know. I actually spoke to Simon quite a lot, but I don't think we had that many volleyball technique conversations. So.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I had I got a one-on-one from him on passing back in the days.
Okay.
So his theory back then was, and I think this is interesting to think about. His theory was that short balls that dive in front of you, you simply cannot take. They will always be aces because you cannot reach them. Okay. But he said, but these high balls, it's possible for you to learn. So yes, it might be challenging, it might be difficult, but it's still possible to learn. So it's about learning something that's difficult versus trying to learn something that's actually not possible to learn. And
yeah, and I think it also depends a little bit what the opponent is gonna be able to do. So I mean, obviously Simon played at a very high level. I mean, 2-time Olympian. I don't know how many top 10 finishes on the World Tour. So I'm sure he's had some really good opponents there who could probably, you know. And I think for a while he even played on the big court. Yeah. So it might be that it was also, you know, they had to cover a bigger court. I have no idea, but
possibly,
it's possibly also related to that. You know, but yeah, I agree. But nowadays, if you look at like the jump servers, how many of them like actually incorporate a short ball?
Probably not many.
Yeah. So, and like there are some, like for example, the Austrian Alex Horst, he has basically every serve. But I think also a lot of it becomes, you know, actually like, if he does a short one, he has to take power off.
Yes.
So you do have a little bit more time, and the ball immediately takes a different flight curve. And we are actually seeing nowadays passers, you know, like going or defending jump serves that are hit the net tape and fall short and still getting them.
Yeah.
So it's hard to argue that, you know, the short one is now impossible.
That's a good point. It could have been a thought from even all the way back from the big court.
Could have been.
And I think in the end, I think it's good for anyone that likes to think about this and decide what's best for them. Is in a sense it's all about statistics. If you, let's say that there is 1 out of 10 balls that goes so short you cannot take it, so you lose 1 of 10 balls automatically. But if you then take a step forwards and you get 3 balls up high, and you can only take 1 of those 3 balls, so you're actually losing you're losing 2 out of 10 rather than 1 out of 10, then it's still a bad strategy, even if you listen to Simon.
Yeah, well, you know, and I also, I'll give you an example. So last summer I played on the German sort of a winter tour, what they had, and we played against Valkenhorst Winter, and their strategy was for both of them to bomb jump serves. So they were both just going for it. And I actually, like, I don't think there was a single ball that landed anywhere else than between 7 and 8 meters, except if it maybe hit the tape. But I don't think they ever went to like a float serve. I don't think they ever went into just rolling the short one. But, you know, for me, it was just an obvious adjustment to make, that I took a step backwards. And, you know, because there was absolutely none of the balls, maybe an accidental one, maybe a bad toss or something, but out of the, you know, 2-3 sets that we played, they were just bombing jump serves. So for me, I took a step backwards.
Yeah, that makes complete sense.
And what it actually did, it worked for us. You know, we got aced less than the other teams that played against them.
Yeah.
I didn't say we won, but, you know, obviously that was one good adjustment that we made. Yeah. If they would start combining in short serves, then I would have to think about something else. Like, can I see the short serve coming early enough and taking those steps forward? Maybe repositioning my legs a little bit, you know, because obviously however I stand also predetermines what my fast movements are. And, you know, if I have my feet parallel, then, you know, it's easier for me to go side to side. But if I put one leg more in front, then it's easier for me to also go. Stuff like that, you know. But then also it's sort of a cost-benefit analysis. In training, I want to be able to do all of them. But in a game, I just, you know, they're only bombing serves. Of course, I'm going to take a step back.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. I'm now realizing when I'm listening to this and your thoughts is that I think one thing that I need to do for my own game is I think my head thinks that everyone is very sneaky and can change their tactics very quickly. So I don't think I look for patterns enough because I think that they're not stupid enough to do patterns.
I think it's
but I think in reality patterns happen a lot more than my mind wants to do, and I should adapt to those patterns.
Yeah, and even if you look at like some of the top World Tour players, they have patterns, and people try to play a certain strategy against them. You know, and you know, there might be a player that is very dominant on the diagonal, and people are going to decide differently. They're going to try to put a block against him. They're going to try to do a defense against him. on the diagonal, or they might even try to double. And people are going to take different approaches to that. But, you know,
here I am, Alex. Sorry for interrupting. There was no good place to cut this episode off. So this is where I cut it off. I hope I didn't disturb you right in some very interesting thought processes. But in the next episode, this conversation will continue, and I will replay a little bit of the last minute here in the beginning of next episode also. So I hope that has been an enjoyable listen. If this is the first episode you ever heard on this podcast, then welcome here. I hope this podcast is going to be here for you to learn a lot more about beach volleyball. And for you guys that have listened before, I hope that this has continued to deliver what the previous episodes has delivered to you as well. So please share this episode to other volley nerds, other people that might find this valuable, and all the other things as well. The more you guys share and help me with this project, the faster I get to a point where I can create more of this content for you guys. So there's a YouTube channel and there's a Facebook group and everything. Follow, subscribe, and stuff like that. And cool. See you in the next episode and have fun until then. Bye.